Okay, let's unpack this. We are diving deep into the Q3 2025 earnings results for Alnylam Pharmaceuticals. And the story here, it feels less about just the quarterly numbers and more about a really big shift.
Yeah, absolutely. We're seeing this company, known for rare diseases, really leveraging its RNAi tech to become a major player in, well, potentially huge markets.
Exactly. So our mission today is to kind of look beyond those headline figures and, pull out the three core pillars driving their strategy.
Right, which seem to be maintaining that TTR leadership, fueling growth through innovation, and crucially, keeping the finances strong to support it all.
And the numbers definitely back up this transition story. Total net product revenue hit $851 million in Q3.
Which is massive growth.
Massive. Staggering, really. 103% year over year. But here's where it gets really interesting for you, the listener. That triple-digit growth isn't mostly from their older drugs. It's largely down to the U.S. launch of one drug in a new indication.
A launch that's only, what, 2 full quarters old?
Exactly.
We're talking AMVUTTRA, right, specifically for ATTR cardiomyopathy, or ATTR-CM. That's the progressive heart failure condition. The whole TTR franchise, so AMVUTTRA plus the older one, ONPATTRO, brought in $724 million.
Wow.
Which is 135% growth globally year over year.
So let's really drill down into that U.S. ATTR-CM launch, because it feels like the engine here.
It absolutely is.
U.S. TTR revenues alone hit $543 million. That's a 194% jump.
Yeah, and they were quite specific about the CM indication's contribution within that.
What did they say?
They estimated it was approximately $300 million just from cardiomyopathy in Q3.
$300 million?
Yeah.
From a launch that just started.
Right. But the really telling metric for the long term is patient demand. They said demand for AMVUTTRA and CM roughly doubled compared to Q2.
Doubled?
Yeah. So it's not just steady uptake. It's really accelerating fast.
Okay, that kind of speed, it doesn't just happen by accident. That points to some serious execution.
For sure. They broke it down into 3 sort of strategic pillars for the launch.
Right.
The first was just getting the infrastructure ready, making sure hospitals could actually use the drug right away.
The health system setup, they called it.
Exactly. And they basically said that part's done now. They targeted about 170 key health systems.
Okay.
And pretty much all of them are using AMVUTTRA, which means, broad access for patients. Like 90% of U.S. patients are within 10 miles of a treatment center.
That's impressive groundwork. But getting the hospital set up is one thing. Insurance coverage, patient costs, that's usually the big hurdle, right?
Often the biggest. And that leads to their second pillar, access. And this is where I think the strategy was really smart.
How so?
Well, access is incredibly strong, payer coverage is broad, but here's the kicker. They managed to get AMVUTTRA positioned so almost all patients can get it first line.
First line, meaning no step edits.
Exactly. No failing on an older, maybe cheaper drug first. Insurers generally aren't forcing that step.
That must speed things up massively.
Yeah.
But what about the cost to the patient?
That's the other part. Most patients, they said, are paying $0 out of pocket.
Zero.
So you remove the step edit barrier, you remove the cost barrier. It just makes the choice much easier for doctors and patients.
Okay, so great setup, great access. That feeds into the third pillar, which was treatment choice. Are they just taking share from older drugs or growing the market?
It looks like both.
Yeah.
Which is ideal, really. They're seeing broad and balanced adoption. So new patients getting diagnosed are going straight to AMVUTTRA.
Right.
But they're also getting patients who were on older stabilizer drugs and maybe weren't doing so well anymore. They're switching over.
In both academic centers and community clinics.
Yep, across the board. It suggests real confidence in the drug.
Okay, the U.S. is clearly firing on all cylinders. What about outside the U.S.? You mentioned global growth was strong too.
It was, yeah. Ex-US TTR revenues grew 46% year over year, driven by places like Japan and Germany where they've launched.
So it sounds like the big global CM rollout is more paced.
Definitely more deliberate. It's interesting, the U.S. launch is racing ahead, but they're actually planning most of the other big country launches for ATTR-CM later, like mid to late 2026.
Why the delay?
It seems to be about getting the pricing right. They need to negotiate reimbursement country by country. So instead of rushing in maybe at a lower price, they're taking the time to secure the value they think the drug deserves.
Smart. Protect the asset long term. Okay, let's pivot slightly. All this commercial success is built on the drug's clinical data. AMVUTTRA's Helios-B results.
Right, the foundation. The updates shared at ESC, the European Society of Cardiology meeting, were strong. They showed the benefit holds up through 48 months, including the open-label part of the study.
And the numbers.
Reduced risk of the main endpoint, that's death, or first cardiovascular event by 37% overall.
And even better for patients just on AMVUTTRA, right?
Yeah.
The monotherapy group.
Yeah, 42% risk reduction there. Really solid numbers.
But beyond the main heart outcomes, there was another detail I found interesting, something about side effects.
Ah, yes, the GI effects. This is actually a pretty big deal for patient quality of life. ATTR-CM isn't just heart disease, it affects multiple systems. And a lot of these patients, maybe 40%, suffer from chronic gut issues.
Right. Nausea, diarrhea, that kind of thing.
Exactly. And the data showed that AMVUTTRA was actually associated with lower rates of these GI problems compared to placebo. Reductions of like 37% to 49%.
That's significant. So the drug helps the heart and potentially eases a really bothersome secondary symptom.
Precisely. That makes it a much more compelling option for doctors and patients, especially for that first-line choice. It's not just modifying the disease, it's improving daily life tangibly.
Okay, makes sense. Now, what about their original business? The rare disease drugs like Givlaari and Oxalomo, are they getting overshadowed?
Not really getting overshadowed, just maybe less focus externally. They're still performing steadily. That portfolio brought in $127 million.
Which is still decent growth.
Yeah, about 14% year over year. It shows that core business is solid, generating cash, even while the big focus is obviously on TTR now.
And speaking of TTR focus, they're not resting on AMVUTTRA. They're already pushing the next generation with nucresiran.
Right. Hedging their bets, ensuring future dominance. Nucresiran is designed to be an even more potent TTR silencer.
Meaning it lowers the TTR protein levels even more.
Potentially, yeah. But the big selling point they're aiming for is dosing, maybe just twice a year.
Wow, a biannual shot.
That's the goal, a subcutaneous injection every 6 months. The Phase 3 Triton program is underway. The CM trial started. The PN trial for polyneuropathy is kicking off soon. Results expected around 2028.
So if competitors emerge, Alnylam hopes to already have the next, potentially better option ready to go.
Exactly. It's a classic lifecycle management strategy, but with potentially game-changing tech.
Okay, let's connect the dots now. This huge commercial success in TTR, the millions flowing in, that's what allows them to fund these really ambitious pipeline programs, right?
Absolutely. It fuels the R&D engine.
And the biggest bet seems to be zilebesiran for hypertension, taking RNAi into a massive common disease.
It's the ultimate pivot, really. Hypertension affects millions, hundreds of millions, but getting people to take daily pills consistently, it's a huge challenge.
Adherence is notoriously bad.
Exactly. So zilebesiran targets angiotensinogen. Now, think about current drugs like ACE inhibitors or ARBs. They work further down the biological pathway, kind of managing the effects.
Okay.
Zilebesiran goes way upstream, targeting the source protein made in the liver that kicks off the whole RAS cascade, the system controlling blood pressure. It's like turning off the main tap instead of fixing downstream leaks.
That's a great analogy. What does turning off the tap mean for patients?
The promise is threefold. 1, better, smoother blood pressure control, less variability day to day. 2, massively improved adherence because it could be a twice-a-year shot.
Right.
And 3, potentially restoring the natural overnight dip in blood pressure, which is important for heart health.
And the Phase 2 KARDIA-3 data backed this up.
It did. Showed significant blood pressure lowering sustained for 6 months. The 300 milligram dose, for instance, dropped systolic BP by an average of about 12 millimole Hg in the overall group. That's a meaningful drop from one dose.
Which led them to commit to the huge Phase 3 trial, Zenith.
Yep, the big cardiovascular outcomes trial, or CVOT.
And that sounds like a massive undertaking. 11,000 patients.
Huge. About 11,000 patients with uncontrolled high blood pressure and high cardiovascular risk. They get the 300 milligram dose every 6 months or placebo.
It's a major commitment of time and money. What's the risk?
The risk is simply the scale and duration. You need a CVOT to prove benefit in a disease like hypertension for regulatory approval and wide adoption. But you're betting, well, potentially billions in 5 or 6 years on one big readout. If it fails, that market opportunity largely disappears.
But the fact they can fund it says a lot about the TTR cash flow.
Absolutely. And starting the trial had an immediate financial upside, too.
Oh, right. The Roche collaboration.
Exactly. Dosing the first patient triggered a $300 million milestone payment from Roche. That certainly helps cushion the cost of running an 11,000-patient study.
Okay, shifting gears slightly. What else is exciting in the pipeline? Bleeding disorders? ALN 6400.
Yeah, ALN 6400 targets plasminogen. The idea is to make it a sort of universal hemostatic agent, something that helps stop bleeding.
Hmm.
It works by slowing down fibrinolysis, which is the body's natural process for breaking down clots. So lower plasminogen, slower clot breakdown, more stable clots, hopefully without increasing the risk of dangerous clots forming.
And the first target is HHT, hereditary hemorrhagic telangiectasia. Why start there?
HHT is the second most common inherited bleeding disorder. It sounds niche, but for patients it's debilitating. About 90% get recurrent severe nosebleeds.
Right, sometimes needing ER visits.
Often, yes. And many develop chronic iron deficiency anemia because of the blood loss. So phase I showed the drug had the desired effect for over 43 days. Now the phase 2 trial in HHT patients is underway. Could be a huge help for them.
And finally, they're pushing into neurodegenerative diseases.
Yeah.
Alzheimer's, that's notoriously difficult territory.
Extremely challenging, yeah. Especially getting drugs into the brain. But they have two key programs moving forward. ALN 5288 targets MAPT, the gene for the tau protein. Phase I started for Alzheimer's and potentially other rare diseases involving tau.
Okay.
And then there's mivelsiran, which targets APP, the amyloid precursor protein. A phase 2 trial in Alzheimer's is expected to start very soon, Q4 2025. It shows they're serious about tackling neurology with RNAi.
Okay, let's bring it back to the financials that make all this possible.
Yeah.
The Q3 results showed a big turnaround in profitability.
A massive turnaround. Non-GAAP operating income was $476 million,
Compared to a loss last year.
compared to a $31 million operating loss in Q3 2024. It's just night and day, driven purely by that top-line growth, especially from AMVUTTRA.
And they seem confident it will continue. They raised guidance again.
Third time this year, yeah. They're now projecting total net product revenue for 2025 between $2.95 billion and $3.05 billion. That's about a 10% raise at the midpoint from previous guidance.
Plus, they have a strong cash position.
Very strong. $2.7 billion in cash and equivalents. Plenty of runway to fund the global TTR rollout and keep those big trials like Zenith going.
So this performance really marks the end of their P5 by 25 era, doesn't it?
It seems so. That was their big strategic push, P5 by 25, aimed at getting profitable and established as a top-tier self-sustaining biotech by the end of 2025.
And based on these results,
I think you'd have to say they've achieved it. Strong TTR leadership, growing revenues, solid profits, and a pipeline funded for the future. They've clearly moved into a new phase.
that foundation seems incredibly solid now.
Yeah, the ability to execute so well in ATTR-CM while simultaneously bankrolling some of the most ambitious RNAi programs out there, that's what's really impressive right now.
So wrapping this up, what does this all mean for you listening? We've watched RNAi technology conquer rare diseases. Now this pivot with drugs like zilebesiran for hypertension, it's a whole different ballgame, imagine. A highly effective drug for high blood pressure, one of the most common chronic conditions, but you only need a shot twice a year. Think about what that could do for adherence for long-term outcomes. Compliance rates could skyrocket simply because it's so infrequent. Is biannual dosing the future for managing major chronic diseases? It really makes you wonder what the next decade holds for RNAi and medicine more broadly.